Hey, this is Johnny Wyatt, and I wanted to say welcome to the BounceBack Podcast, where we help you to navigate your faith, where we help you to learn how to live, grow, and find your way back. As pastor and coach and teacher, I help you to navigate faith, relationships, and the real challenges of life. And today we're going to talk about leadership, not leadership in theory, but leadership in real life, in real time, and in real transition. I was talking to a friend recently, a friend of mine, close friend. We're from the same generation, we're Generation X. And somewhere in the conversation, it hit us both that at our age, we're the leaders now. Not middle management. Of course, we still inhabit some of that, but we're like the leaders now, like for real, the leaders. If you look at um, my church, you look at other institutions, the people at the top now are from Generation X. So like for real, we're not the young voices in the room anymore. We're not the ones waiting for direction anymore, right? We're the ones people are looking to, right? But here's what made the conversation very interesting. We realized that we're dealing with two very different leadership realities at the same time. And in some spaces, nobody wants the job. In other spaces, working spaces, people want the job, but they don't want the responsibility that comes with that. Let that sit with you. We're dealing with this reality in an ever-changing new world. Let me name it from my point of view first. In my world, the church world, we're facing a leadership shortage. Whether you're talking about my church, the Pentecostal Holiness Church, whether you're talking about my church that I work in, the Apostolic Faith Church, whether you're talking about the Catholic Church or the different spaces, we're in a world where there's a shortage of leadership. Pastors are aging, leaders are getting tired, they're dealing with burnout. And when you look around, when we look around, but really when you look back at the guard coming up, there's nobody behind us. And it's really scary. Nobody's lining up to take on leadership in the coming generation. People are watching leadership, and they're not sure they want that life, right? And that's the real reality there. They're not sure if they want the pressure of being the pastor or the leader, the pressure of always having to show up, the pressure of responsibility, the pressure that we face of growing a church, maintaining a church, growing the ministry, raising the funds, and meeting the challenges that it faces. And so that's real. The challenges and the pressure, not only the pressures of the institution, but the pressures of people that come from the expectations that they have of you. There's real pressure there. And so people are not sure they want the pressure or the expectations. So people struggle with the pressures, but they also struggle with the expectation. The expectation that somehow you are better than other people in your behavior, that you're perfect, or that you have it all together. So there's the expectation that comes with leadership, expectation of a higher level of abilities and clarity, high expectation that, again, with the same pressure, you're always on. And so we have to deal with that as well. Not only do we have to deal with expectation, then there's the critique and the criticism. Not every leader, all leaders have to face this. Every leader has to face criticism and critique and dealing with the stress of leadership. But most of all, there is a constant critique. Everything you do is under scrutiny. So if you're preaching, your messages will be critiqued. If you are making leadership decisions, that will be critiqued. But this is not just specific to ministry, it's specific to all the levels of leadership. Leaders will be critiqued, and rightfully so. if you decide to take up the responsibility of leadership, you ought to also be willing to take up. People have a right to have their opinion about the way you're moving. And sometimes it's negative, sometimes it's actually very helpful and beneficial. We have to open our hearts and our minds to hear what people have to say. But the criticism of leadership can be challenging as well. And we see it not only in ministry, but in other areas. And then there's the lack of support. The idea that sometimes the feeling that you're doing it all by yourself, that is real. Not that you're doing it all by yourself. You get those Elijah moments. Elijah felt like he was all alone. And there's parts of what I do as a pastor and leader, what politicians do, what particular areas of leadership where you're serving people, that there are these moments. But I believe this is the same way in most leadership, where sometimes you just don't feel like you have the financial support, you don't have the people support, the leadership support. So all of these are valid issues that we face in what I do as a pastor and what I do as in church leadership. So for a lot of people, a lot of younger people today, it's like, I love God. I want to serve God, but I don't want that assignment, right? So in my world, the challenge is a leadership assignment, because people have to face the different pressures that come with that, and they're just not signing up for it. They're not signing up because of the pressure, the expectations, the criticism, and the lack of support. But as I was talking to my friend, I realized in her world, she's dealing with something a little distinctive that's different from my world, right? It's not that people don't want leadership, that they don't want the job, that they don't want the responsibility. And I find this to be the case in my world too. But she really pointed this out for me. They want the job. They want the title. They want the position. They want the influence, the authority. But what they don't want is the responsibility. That preaches right there. They want all the blessings of leadership, right? The job, the title, the praise, right? The position, the influence, the connections that it brings. But what they really don't want is the responsibility. What they want is authority, but not accountability, right? And so that's the powerful thing. They want authority and they don't want accountability. They want visibility. They don't want pressure. They want the platform, but not the burden. And I thought about that. And I said, wait a minute. We don't have just one problem. We have two problems, two major problems that we're facing today in terms of leadership, right? Let's talk about what's really going on, right? Number one of the reasons that these things exist is because, number one, leadership has been modeled poorly, right? If leadership looks like burnout, stress, scandal, always being on, always being criticized, why would anybody today, when there's so many options, why would anybody fully step into that, right? Okay. And so some leadership positions look like it's all bad, right? And there's no benefit to it. And the truth is, if we're going to do anything, we want a little bit, to be honest, we want to see how we are blessed and benefited by the leadership roles we take on. But what people have seen, particularly in the service, in me and my friend, we both work in the areas of social service and helping people. And that's what I've seen. Not only that's what people have seen, but that's what I've seen. Burnout, stress, always being on, always being criticized. That's why even in our politics, we don't have the best people coming forward, right? Because why would anybody want to step into arenas or spaces that are so toxic, right? So we show people toxicity. We've invited people into that toxicity, but people said, I don't want the toxicity, right? So why would anybody, again, want to see that? So what you're seeing is a split response. Some people are saying, I don't want it at all. Others are saying, I want it, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to redefine it so that it doesn't cost me as much, right? So that's what we're seeing. So the few people that you do see step up, sometimes we're aggravated because they don't behave in the same ways we were taught to behave. And so that can stress you out as a leader because you want to see people that seem to care about it just as much as you care about it. And we're not seeing that. But it doesn't that mean that they doesn't care about it. It just means that they've learned different lessons than me and my generation and those before me. Number 2, responsibility feels like pressure, not purpose. This generation doesn't hear responsibility the way we did, right? We heard responsibility and thought and still think purpose, calling, growth. And let me say that differently. Purpose or meaning. My life means something if I take on this responsibility. And my responsibility makes me somebody. It's my calling. It's my opportunity. Responsibility gives me the opportunity to grow and become, in my particular area of service, what God has called me to be. But I believe that even politicians and business leaders and people in the health industry, people that have become doctors, part of it is the reward. But yes, a great deal of why we are leaders and we step into leadership positions is because we want to hold responsibility. We were taught that responsibility means something, right? What they see and hear, right? So we think one thing, we saw one thing, right? But what the younger generation heard and saw and what they think is stress and anxiety and depression and losing myself, right? So they got something totally, completely different. And to be honest, that's what they saw. Some of it is exactly because this is what they were showed. They were shown that, and I want to share this. When I was growing up, our leaders weren't as transparent or open with us, and so we didn't see. And I think to some degree it was actually a plus that we didn't get to see some of the negative aspects of the leadership position, because there are some things that if you see it too soon, every area of leadership, every area of responsibility, every area of academic or vocational discipline comes with burdens. But that's not what entices people into calling or into meaningful leadership. What does invite people is purpose, growth, the opportunity to respond to a calling and to make meaning out of their lives. And so that's what, instead, we showed them too much, right? Like my children or young people around me have seen more of what I've went through, what I faced in previous generations than what I saw my father go through and my grandfather went through. And maybe sometimes the less you see in your formative stage, the better. But I digress. The third thing that happened is institutions broke trust. Institutions maybe were the problem, right? Let's be real. Institutions have not always been trustworthy, right? Whether you're talking about the church, whether you're talking about government, whether you're talking about medical hospital systems, whether you're talking about big business, right? All of those institutions have caused pain. But I got to be honest, in my particular way of life, we deal with church hurt. People have been, and that's a term I haven't heard when I was a child, but now as an adult, I'm hearing about this term church hurt more and more, and it's real. So people have been hurt by pastors, by the way the church sometimes has used doctrine and teachings to hurt and wound people. The way we discipline people, or church hurt can be the way we've used people. They volunteered, they gave their all, but there was no appreciation. Some of it is workplace burnout. It's not that the church hurt them, but over time, they gave so much to the church that they had nothing left to give. They poured out, but the institution didn't pour back in. Or simply there weren't good rhythms built in, right? So you deal with church hurt, you deal with workplace burnout, and then there's also systems that use people instead of developing them, right? I kind of conflated the two, but that's in and of itself an issue. That systems and institutions today, and this is not necessarily the church, but this is the larger world. Younger people saw what happened when their parents trusted institutions and worked for institutions for 10, 15, 20 years. And then at the end, one of the most disillusioning experiences for me when I was in my early 20s was what happened with Enron. There was this highly celebrated company, but they were cooking the books, and many people lost their jobs and their 401ks. And even when I was even younger, that's when factory jobs and were beginning to be moved overseas. And so people who were relying on factory jobs and pensions, and what Ronald Reagan did in the early 80s with the air traffic controllers, and how when they went on strike, he fired them instead of negotiating with them. He, in that way, said it's okay for institutions to put their needs over and above the needs of labor and workers. Now, this is not an episode for me to talk about the difference between capitalism and socialism and different economic systems, but in and of itself, what they saw, that we might not know what we saw as an economics major in school. I actually know what we saw. We saw class struggle in many cases, and but most of the time people don't understand that's what's being played out. All they see is that their parents, their grandparents lost their job. They see people work hard, and when they need medical assistance, they go bankrupt. They have to file for bankruptcy because the bills are too high. People see today that you pay insurance, but when you need insurance, it's not paid out. And so in so many ways, institutions have lost our trust because they're not there for people. They're there for the institution. So what we end up having is a generation that says, I'm not giving myself to something that might break me. And to some degree, I can't blame them. But that's not the solution, right? And then the big challenge here for me and my generation is that Gen X is the bridge. This is where we come in at, right? We're the bridge generation. And this is what it looks like. We understand the system, right? But we also see its flaws. This is kind of what I just said. I understand the way the world and the system should work, and that you need systems and institutions in order to have a functioning society. But we got to be honest, we also see its flaws. My dad still, even up to this day, rarely sees flaws in the church or in institutions that he works for. But me, I see the flaws. And so that's because we're the bridge. We bridge the time before Wi-Fi, right? And I remember life before Wi-Fi, right? But I also know how to reset the router, right? When I was going to college, that's when, you had computer labs in school, but we were the first generation. Excuse me. We were the first generation to do that. But so let me be serious. We're trained to carry the weight. We were trained to carry weight. We were trained to stay, to endure. We were trained to be resilient. We were trained to figure things out, right? Which was good in terms of our personal resiliency. But what it also was subtly saying is the institution won't always be there for you. So you have to be independent. And so I believe that's what my generation learned. My generation learned how to work with the institution, but also know that you have to, I think side hustle comes from my generation, right? We know that we have to be building a side revenues and just in case money and stuff like that, right? But the next generation, they were trained to protect themselves. Maybe they're smarter than us with that, but it comes at protecting yourself comes at a cost to community, right? This is the deeper issue. Here's the part we don't talk about enough. There was a time when people didn't just step into leadership, they were formed by it. This is the challenge we face. The challenge at the heart of it is a formation problem. Culture itself did the work. The larger culture did the work. So with the issues, because the issue is you have young people that are at jobs and um, they come in, they want to take on the responsibility, they want to take on the leadership function, but they don't have the capacity to really lead. They don't have the capacity to provide the institutions with what they need. And sometimes it seems like there's no way for us to have real discussion. There's no one of the challenges is just natural respect, being taught how to speak to each other, right? Like when you're on the phone all day long, screaming, doing the doom scroll, what ends up happening is that we lose our sense of humanity. And maybe that's the problem underneath it all, that as we become more technologically savvy, we lose community. We're losing community and connectivity. And that's what makes us human. What makes a lion is his roar and his strength and his jaw. What makes a dolphin is his ability to swim fast. What makes a giraffe is his long neck and is able to eat, at high altitudes per se. That's the best way I could tell. But what makes humans distinctly human is what God says in Genesis chapter 2. It's not good for man to be alone. That we were built and made for community. And the further we move into this new technological age, this hyper nano technological age, we're losing our humanity. And when we lose our humanity, we lose the way we lose our capacity to lead and hold up institutions. Because what we're doing in all of these institutions is having community. When we lose the heart of community, we lose everything. When there's no community in our jobs or in our churches, in our homes, we lose the fabric of what it means to be community, because we were never meant to be alone. When we're alone and isolated, we're at our weakest point. So, and so we're losing the things that the culture itself taught us. Homes, you were formed in your home. You were taught different things at home, how to talk to people, how to be responsible, how to pitch in, those things how to do your chores. Those are all tools that we would need later on, right? We learned things, school formed us, knowing what it means to be on time for class and to have projects that had to be handed in on time. So we were formed by school, right? Learning to negotiate with our teachers and be accountable and participate, right? And to just show up. And then church formed you. Church made you resilient, and church helped you to have the kind of leadership tools that like no other organization has. Before I learned communication in college, I learned communication at church. I learned how to communicate. Before I learned how to lead other people on my job, I learned it at the church. The church, many of the skills I have, the powerful skills, faith, and the ability to have critical thinking, a lot of those things weren't just formed in school, but they were formed in church. Ultimately, community formed us in all these things. Community formed us. Not perfectly, but consistently over time, generation after generation. You went to church, you learned your recital. Twice a year we had to do it. We had to do a recitation, or there were. I went to music school, and after a year of classes with my music instructor, I had to give a recital. So we learned to practice and then perform or demonstrate. Look out for some more content that's going to come around what it means to be formed. Formation has at its structure 3 pillars, and I'm not going to get into that today, but it's important that we know that. By the time we stepped out of community, by the time you stepped into your responsibility, you had a base level of not a base level of skill, but a base level of character. Right? At the heart of leadership, at the core of it, what I've learned as a minister and a pastor, as a doctor of ministry, is at the heart of leadership is character. Amen. If you're going to lead, you have to have character to stand on. But that system is not as strong as it used to be. Families are under pressure, right? Families are under pressure, constant pressure. Whether you have one parent or two, parents are working all day long. They have less time with their kids, less time to teach them, less time to correct, less time to model. They spend when both parents are working two jobs, they don't have the capacity unless there's 2 and 3 generations. And so for families, one of the things people really have to think about is going back to multiple multiple or intergenerational family units where grandma is home or auntie and uncles are present, so that um, it's not the responsibility of simply mommy and daddy to raise up the children, but there's a unit, particularly for people, amen, from marginalized communities. Schools are inconsistent, right? The project to the project toward the market driven school creates unstable schools. I'm not here to advocate for a public school, although I do advocate it. I think public schools are the best thing that we have going. Charter schools are good if you can find a good charter school, but the problem with charter schools is that they're inconsistent. They're here today and gone tomorrow. They don't have to deal with the complexity of your formation. And so our schools are inconsistent, right? Based on your the excellence of your school, or the capacity of your school, or the competency of your school is based on the neighborhood you lived in. And then churches themselves, we are navigating our own challenges. Help us, Lord, right? And then our communities, we see it in the news. We see it in so many areas of our lives. Communities are fragmented. So what used to be assumed can no longer be assumed. What was assumed? That our communities, our churches, our families were forming people's character, that when they walked into leadership roles, they were ready with a baseline level of character. Because let me be honest with you, when you walk into leadership, I remember when I walked into leadership as a senior pastor over 13 years ago, I thought I was ready skill wise. But there were so many things I have to learn, and so many things I still have to learn. And so every time I walk into another leadership opportunity, I always know that it's a chance for me to learn something new, that I'll never stop learning how to be a leader, constantly learning how to be a leader, how to integrate, and how, amen, to be adaptive, right? Because the world is changing. So because the world is changing, leadership and the capacity to lead is always in growth. But the one thing that is the same is the need for character, right? We assume that people came in with a base level of character, base level of integrity, a base level of responsibility, a base level of expectation. People are stepping into leadership without being formed by it and then formed for it. We have leaders who are not formed to be leaders. And that explains both problems that I brought up today. Why some people don't want leadership at all, and why others want it, but don't carry it well. Don't carry it well. So now every institution is being forced to face a new reality. And I think I don't have all the solutions. I really don't have, I want to say I don't have solutions at all. But what I have is a couple of ideas, form the beginners of solutions. Number one, what we can do is redefine responsibility. We have to refine what it means to be responsible. Because right now, responsibility looks like isolation. You got to do it by yourself. Pressure, constant pressure of failure, and then burnout. That's what people see. That's what the younger generation sees when it sees leadership. You're all alone on an island. You face the pressure, the critique, and then you burn out. And there's a lot of truth to that. If that's the picture, nobody's going to sign up for that. Nobody's wanting to sign up to that. So we have to show a different model of what responsibility looks like. Responsibility should look like shared leadership. Instead of me doing it alone, I work with a team, and we respect one another, and we share the load of leadership, right? So you may have a senior pastor, but there should also be executive pastors and discipleship pastors. And I don't hold the responsibility on my own. And so maybe Moses was right to say, Lord, I can't do this by myself. He was right. And God's response was, I'm going to send you a help. And then later on, his father-in-law tells him, you can't do this on your own. So isolated leadership was never the model that God had for any type of leadership. It has always been shared leadership. One leader is going before God for the vision, and other leaders are dealing with the day-to-day, with the other responsibilities. There's so much responsibility to go around. And so leadership has to be shared. And then we have to support one another. When it's my turn to lead, I need your support. When it's your turn, you need to know that I'm there. And support looks like presence most of all. It looks like presence, but it also looks like bearing the load with your fellow leaders. Then it looks like growth. Like I said before, sometimes we put leaders in spaces where we give them opportunity, but we don't give them growth. We don't give them models of growth. We don't give them lessons, and we don't give them models for how to lead. We don't give them mentorship. And people have to understand that leadership is not the end, but it's the beginning of a new stage of growth. And so responsibility looks like growth, and it looks like sustainability. It looks like something that I can do for the long haul, something that I can do for a lifetime, that I won't burn out. Right? So again, it's shared leadership, it's support, it's growth, and it's sustainability. If the only model of leadership is suffering, we shouldn't be surprised when people don't want it. So have we advertised suffering? Yeah. And even Jesus says we have to take up our cross and follow him. But he gives us a telos. That simply means that we have a goal in mind. And the goal is not suffering. The goal is flourishing and formation. I come that you may have life and that you may live it to the full. But the journey is a journey of formation and discipleship. Deny yourself, take up your cross, and be formed. But be formed to be in the image of Christ. And so the end is a blessed ending, right? So the Christian life and the spiritual life and the life of leadership is a beautiful opportunity to grow to your fullness. It's going to expose, leadership will expose many of your weaknesses, and certain types of leadership will expose more of you. But as you're exposed, if we have the support we need, we will become the best versions of ourselves. And especially in the church, we preach abundance sometimes. We preach the abundant life. I just said it, John 10, but then I model exhaustion. So help me and help the rest of our leaders to not only preach abundance, but model an abundant leadership, right? Number 2, then I'll get out your way because I don't want to be here long today. We have to develop character before we deploy people. Here's the second thing. And this is probably the biggest one of all. We have to take responsibility for developing people, not just their skills, right? Not just their gifting. If we're doing that, we're just using people. Not just their potential, not what they do well for me, but as people cycle through our organizations, whether it's church or government or social services or big business or sports arena, in all these things, we see a system where people focus on what they can get. They focus on giving us skills because the skills make the bottom line better. They focus on our giftings because their giftings help us to support. And they focus on extracting our potential because we have an extraction society. But people don't focus on character because that's the slow work. Nobody gets praised for having good character until our character fails. So say this slowly with me before I get out of here. Because leadership is not sustained by skill. It is sustained by character, right? So say it one more time. Leadership is not sustained by skill. It's sustained by character. I'll say it one more time. Leadership is not sustained by skill. Leadership is sustained by character. Character is not perfection, by the way. Character is your ability to be the same person in every space, not a perfect person. But if you say you're reliable, you're always reliable. If you say you don't talk about people, or you don't gossip, um, you are who you are. Everybody can say the same things about you. That's character. Character is, can I trust you? So now every institution, church, business, education, government, social services, sports, so much more, has to intentionally do what culture used to do, what families used to do, what schools used to do, what communities used to do, even what church used to do. And they did it automatically. and we took it for granted. That's what capitalism does, of course. But anyway, one day I'm gonna do a capitalistic critique because it's bubbling inside of me. But we have to be practical. We have to train earlier. We have to train often. We have to build character, not just competence. We have to teach responsibility in stages. And then we have to create environments for growth. Let me say those things again. Maybe I'll do larger extension episodes because this is a really good episode. But train earlier and train often, right? Yeah, we have to train. Companies and institutions have to invest in schools and invest in programs before, because one of the things a company might say is, it's not my responsibility to make sure you're ready for the job when you get here. That may have been the idea before, but we can no longer say that. So we have to train early. We have to train often because the world keeps changing. So as the world changes, we have to know how to teach people not to anticipate the change, but know how to navigate as the rivers, as the flow of the river and as the flow changes, right? We have to build character and not competence. We have to teach responsibility in stages, right? And that's powerful and important. And then we have to create environments for growth. We can't just give people a title anymore. We have to give them formation. And don't just wait until they're in position to start developing them, right? Because by then it's already too late. So I'm about to get out of here. Here's where we are. Some people are avoiding leadership. Others are stepping into leadership, but trying to carry it lightly. But real leadership has weight. And you have to build the capacity to hold that weight, right? You have to be able to bear the load of leadership, just like the great buildings that we see, whether they're in New York City with the Liberty Tower, or all the way in Abu Dhabi with the tallest building in the world, which I can't remember the name of it now. But in order for those buildings to grow to great heights, they had to build the resiliency, the capacity. There's another word I'm looking for when you test steel or test metal, but they have to have the capacity to hold the weight that it's built for, right? So the question is not whether the weight exists. The question is whether we're preparing people to carry it well. And if we do this right, we don't just pass down positions. We'll raise up people who actually have the strength, the wisdom, and the character to lead in a way that's healthy, sustainable, and meaningful. So listen, wherever you are in this journey, whether you're leading, you're thinking about leading, or recovering from leadership, if you've gotten to my stage, amen, at some point you've been doing all three. You don't have to stay stuck where you are. Growth is still possible. Formation is still possible. And no matter what you're navigating, even if it takes time, you can find your way back. I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.